we are getting to jump into the game here, and it is going to be, as you mentioned, this mirror mage match first, which not completely mirror match, not card for card mirror match, but both mages here, and Meati on the coin with this potential coining into a cold case.
Yeah, both players going to be keeping a very similar open hand, so double cold case as well, from some options to at least start piling on some levels of pressure. And whichever way, whoever wins this matchup, we do know the other, it's going to be pretty explosive, because I feel like it's a lot of whoever blinks first in terms of either mistiming or simply not having access to those solid alibis to buy that extra turn. I think a lot of it is going to fall on that, unless one player gets some kind of heavy advantage in the early game and starts piling on a ton of pressure for like those massive plays, so to speak, but just a couple of spells with a little bit of spell damage thrown in to maybe burst the last 10 or so.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did see that discover option there. Uikyou going for the discovery, trying to find a little bit more options in the potential. There could have been the potential for something like Deathborn, but maybe not in this mirror match is something that you want there. I like the cheap discovery option instead. And talking about discovery, we have another choice on the other side here. Rewind, definitely looking pretty good over those other options.
Yeah, I think there's a moment where you go, okay, how fancy can I be, or should I just go for the good card? And a lot of the time, even though you might think you can be cool, the good card is the way forward. Just a generic, this is going to do something, guaranteed. Now, interest though for Uikyou, a Shard of the Naru available. Yeah, it looks good to me.
Yeah. Especially being able to fit in some of these additional spell school archetypes with that cheap mana. Allows for a lot of things, especially with Sif sitting in hand. You want to kind of build up those spell schools. And it's talking about school. How about schooling to add some more minions? But nope, gonna go for the relic as well. Seems pretty decent as well. Just a little bit of additional removal as well as that cheap spell to play.
Yeah, I think although schooling is a fantastic card, I think hand size is a problem, right? Like, it's got to be played, then the hand's going to be big, so then you've got to spend mana on the fish, and then suddenly a lot of mana being spent really progressing the game plan. Like, even now, schooling would clear off some minions, but is that what you want to do with your turn in this mirror? I'm going to say no. So we're going to see Uikyou just try and clear up some of this with the free spells, with the relic, and then just drop a cold case themselves.
Yeah. It seems pretty decent as well, just being able to get a little bit out there, play these spells, and as you said, kind of clear up hand space. That is an issue with new cards like the volume up. These players want to be playing volume up, but honestly, there can be hand size issues. And I have also seen some players deciding if they even want to be running 2 volume up sometimes because of that hand size. Well, the keyboard coming into hand is pretty nice here. The mana is slightly awkward here for Uikyou, deciding maybe if he wants to go for the keyboard now, build up some of that tempo, or just go for drawing more cards. But I don't know if the solid alibi is something that is going to be coming into play at this point in the game.
It's really tricky, isn't it? Because generally speaking, solid alibi is normally to stop the big OTKs, but if you leave it too late, the damage has been done, right? Like, if Uikyou just gets hit by all of this damage, then sure, you can solid alibi later, but you've already taken like 10 extra or something, right? When it could have been reduced a lot.
Yeah, and it's really interesting as well, looking at potentially that part of the game, that point in the game, if it's late, or even on boards like what Meati has here. If you wait too long to play those solid alibis, things like these skeletons or even the elementals from the elemental inspirations, well, if you have 5, 6, 7 minions on board, you're still able to push 5, 6, 7 damage,
right,
even through solid alibi. And sometimes that's just enough to end the game, depending on how much damage you've been able to push in the early parts.
Yeah, Reaver being picked up, but weirdly enough, one of those situations where both players, at least at this second in time, don't really have tons of options. Of course, Uikyou now does have options to discover and generate some more cards, but in general, I'm more used to seeing this matchup be like two players with full hands for the majority of the game.
Yeah, it definitely does feel a little weird here. And we're going to see that discover. There is 3 different spell school types here for Uikyou to decide between. I don't. Unleash Fell does not feel like it really does a ton here, but it is cheap.
Yeah, and it's heal, right? Like it's not a lot of healing,
Yeah.
but it's something as a because looking at this now, Uikyou is down on 19. I mean, that's just dead soon, right? Like 19 is not safe at all. So it does have to do something to get a little bit of health. Only pushed up to 22, but it's better than nothing. Does get a lot of card draw here as well. Molten Rune always looks good to me, but these are good options.
Yeah, kind of a choice here between dealing some damage with one of the either the Flame Geyser or that Molten Rune, or just going yet again for even more discovery here, discovering into another spell school type that he hasn't played yet. Again, with that Sif in hand, and now some damage with the Molten Rune and Flame Geyser. Maybe just wants to discover something else.
Well, these are good options.
Yeah.
Obviously, the nature effect is not that amazing, of course, in Mage, but just draw a card with the Nature Spell School. I mean, these are all looking good, but is it too late for Love Everlasting? Maybe.
I mean, the discount on the first spell is pretty enticing.
It's really good. I'm just thinking when it's going to be played, because I didn't catch it then, but Meati does have the play basically lined out for next turn, right, with Elemental. So, has Meati played it? This is what's really difficult to remember everything that's played, because I was going to say, Meati might have chosen this because it just is playable this turn, and I think that might have added an extra Elemental for Meati, so that could be something beneficial to do this turn, as opposed to picking a card that is powerful, but you wouldn't play for another, like, 2 turns anyway.
Oh, absolutely. The due process pickup, pretty interesting there, but how about some stats?
Stats are always good. I never complain about stats. These going to be the Otters?
Yeah, I was going to say probably just to clear up some of this board and probably try to soak up some of that damage from the skeleton instead of having it go face, which it did.
There's inspiration. Only for 4, but double stealth and reborn. Okay. The double stealth is actually huge. That might well just make Uikyou have to go over to an alibi this turn, because I think if there's no way, I can't see if there's a way to deal with these, but if you're just going to take 8, put yourself down to 12, you're not feeling confident, are you?
No.
What other options do they have for now, though? They don't have to commit to the alibi quite yet.
I mean, it is still pretty threatening, though, these minions on board, even though, as you said, it's only, quote unquote, only 4, but that is an impressive amount of pressure here. And again, looking at the kind of differences in the cards, the card choices for their decks, Uikyou is not playing the elemental inspirations. So he's not going to be able to apply that pressure. Oh,
it's just really tricky because the double stealth, right? Like, that's just such a pain. It's going to go reverb, okay. Gets then the easy trades on the elementals.
Playing that due process as an additional nature spell, but yeah, it does end up going for that solid alibi there.
And this is the position you want to be in, right? If you're playing this mirror, you want to be in Meati's seat right now, because making your opponent solid alibi first generally gets you ahead as long as you have your own to play, right? Obviously, if they solid alibi first and then you don't have any at all, that's going to be a bit of a problem. But Meati's hand looks very, very powerful right now. Has options of Norganon, can also has double solid alibi just ready to go, and they're not even particularly needed right now, still sitting at that 30 health. Can use this turn to just clear up the board and basically ask Uikyou to, threaten me again. Like, see how many turns in a row you can actually threaten, because I think Meati should be feeling, I'll say, safe-ish at 30.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting meta, and the way that some of these decks just are built, and the kind of lineups that we're looking at as well. We've talked about it, I think, across a lot of our games already today, that kind of difference of on board versus from hand. And even though this mage is kind of built to be doing all of that damage from hand, this is one of those cases where, yeah, maybe Meati does actually feel pretty good here at 30, although in some cases he probably would not.
And we saw then, even just the push, as you mentioned earlier, through the solid alibi, still pushing what I think 4 it was, whilst clearing the board. Like, that's significant, because it just makes each turn easier and easier. And now Uikyou forced into the second solid alibi. And even then, like, the follow-up still just doesn't feel great.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see here if Uikyou wants to go for forging either of these molten runes this turn to try to set up for something next turn. But if there's no lethal from him, then he's got to worry about the lethal from the other side.
Yeah, I think the problem here, or something, not saying I have a strong decision on this either way, but I feel like if this was draw and then ping, it's like, okay, but I was with you where do you just molten rune face with the forge and just say, well, there's some damage done. Hopefully I can make something happen next turn. Because I'm not sure what draws at this point are realistically going to make Uikyou win the game.
Yeah, and I mean, having that solid alibi is great, sure, but as you mentioned, it's the second alibi now, so if there is not that lethal on the other side, there's also not another solid alibi to come up behind that. So Uikyou is definitely going to have to find something.
This is just 7 damage with a ping, right? Which is
nearly
half the health that your opponent has through a solid alibi, which is never bad.
So
is this just good for Norganon?
That's what I was just about to ask you. Yeah, I think so. At this point, maybe Meati just has to be asking himself, I have now seen the second alibi. I feel like I'm in a strong position. How do I lose from here? And maybe just setting that up or setting up an alibi is something.
Yeah, there's a couple of options, right? Like, there's this version where it's, I'm so far ahead, it'll be fine. Got hold of objection as well, so that's going to cause some levels of trouble for Uikyou. But I do think the Norganon with the Lotheb effect was fine as well. I think Meati can just choose, as long as he doesn't completely throw, can just choose a path to victory here, because I'm not sure what gets Uikyou here, unless I just can't count. But none of these are forged.
Yeah.
There's not that much damage loaded up. Already that's 1 mana down. So there is the board clear with the 4s, but the board clear just doesn't matter if there's no alibi, right? Meati's maybe if Meati had like 2 cards in hand, you could be just thinking, okay, they don't have anything, right? But I feel like with this, it's actually been the board presence, because although Uikyou's had hold of Sif all game and Meati hasn't, it just doesn't really matter.
Yeah. And this is so interesting as well, because I think for the most part, we kind of saw this panning out as Uikyou kind of was ahead in terms of playing the spell schools and kind of getting things rolling. And as you can see over on the kind of right side of the screen, also pulled ahead, maybe a bit the last couple of turns, but kind of pulled ahead in terms of card advantage. But Meati put on more pressure, and I forced those early alibis, and now just this is kind of it.
Yeah. Yeah, now there should just be plenty available.
Yeah.
That's just going to be game with the reverberations on the Norgon. Find out who's going to make it to tomorrow as we move into game 2. Meati going to be jumping on that Mech Rogue. Uikyou going back to the Mage once again. Have you played much Mech Rogue so far, Dawn?
I did kind of early on in the expansion, but ultimately decided that, especially prepping for this tournament, I kind of wanted to focus a little bit more on like Mage and Shaman and some of those OTK style decks that I personally typically don't play a ton of. So I kind of focused in that direction. But not only playing a little bit less, we also did kind of recently have a nerf to one of the cards that was being played in Mech Rogue, and a lot of people kind of dropped it as well. So it kind of faded out for a little bit, came back in. Also talking about this Mech Rogue, we see that got pitched in the mulligan. Meati actually opting to run that V07 Tron, the Voltron Titan, which not all of the Mech Rogue lists are including.
Yeah, it's what we were talking about earlier. Just all the players. It's such a great time for a tournament because everything's still in the mix, right? I imagine prepping for this tournament as a player must have been, one, stressful, but two, also fun, because it does feel like you can be a pretty experimental here. And we're going to see an early Mimiron come out, and now Havoc will no doubt ensue.
Yeah, getting that Mimiron out early is it's just so impressive, honestly. I feel like, especially because this 5 health is a little bit difficult for some of these decks to deal with, especially this early. And it's going to be a little bit of work for Uikyou to try to actually answer this before Meati's able to start snowballing it.
Yeah, especially with the coolant in hand, like Meati could just do a lot of absurd things next turn, just based off the hand that we are looking at now. Never mind how that hand may progress going forward. There is going to be the keyboard into the Flame Geyser as well, which is going to help a little bit. But as you mentioned, oh, there's Voltron. As you mentioned, the Mimiron just pretty much guaranteed to just sit there and be happy for a turn can really make things accelerate, especially with the Spider in hand as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, stealth is kind of a big keyword for this rogue deck as well. We talked about, or we've heard about, Wind Fury, right? That can be definitely something, as we saw in the previous series, kind of at the end, being able to heal up with lifesteal, also very impactful. But against decks that are trying to play these spells from hand, trying to do other things to target, being able to stealth this big body and then be able to do additional things with it the following turn, pretty important.
Yeah, I think the only thing Meati's missing right now is just a few more minions to be able to play out, right? Like Voltron's a little bit ways away. That's okay, the Oscillator's something. Oh wait, no, of course, the coolant. Never mind, it's not a few turns away. Considering I talked about the coolant about 30 seconds ago, I quickly just forgot it existed for a second there. But yeah, that's a big, big deal, just being able to drop that down, and now Uikyou's got to be sweating.
Yeah, and this is an interesting choice for the Titan. I think either choosing the can't be targeted, kind of along the same lines of stealth that we were just talking about, that could be pretty impactful, but also with only 1 4 health minion and then face on board, going for a little bit of a buff and dealing 4 twice also didn't seem like that bad of an option.
Yeah, I think I like this though, because I feel like if these stick, it only gets worse for Uikyou, right? Like it just goes downhill. We saw the Rewinder, which is effectively sap, going out there to defend them even more. Because you've just got to think, at this point, what is the plan here for the Mage player? Like, what is the out? Because this just feels like you're trying to stave off disaster, even though it's already happened.
Yes, absolutely. I think the plan is survive as long as possible and hope it all comes together. But it's feeling a little dire already.
It really, I think it pretty much was just roll the perfect card from a different class, right? It's like, find a card that deals with this somehow in any possible way. And I don't think it really does anything. There's clean the scene, but that's going to be... Is that just too far away?
That's so expensive, too. Yeah, goes for it anyways,
Okay.
but yeah,
I
it
guess
might be.
I guess at this point it's just you've got to go for the long shots, right? It's just one of those things where it's like, right, I'm in a bad situation.
Yeah.
I'll play as if things are going to go my way to get out of this situation.
Yeah. Also, I think this use of the putting something back in your hand, creating another body on board, it's not ideal, but it also does mean that an additional spell school was played, with that being a shadow
Yeah.
spell, which could be just building up these inquisitive creations here to
Well,
try to eliminate stuff off the board, but still don't think it's going to be enough.
well, I think it's important because it helps with the infuse, right? Because if this gets
Yeah.
infused, the clean the scene, then it will kill both minions.
I mean, unless there's enough magnetize to put it out of
Yeah,
range, but
again,
Meati's not going to play around the discovered infuse there.
Well, going back to the Uikyou's just got to do the long shots and hope they work
Yeah.
out, right? I think that's
Absolutely.
what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I guess at this point, maybe like a shard of the Naru, like you got last game,
Right,
could help. But still, I mean, at the rate that this game has been going, would that even be enough?
Yeah, outside of a very specific, kill a thing or remove a thing card, the Mimiron now is just it's too big, right? It's just the stats don't matter anymore because it is simply too large.
I mean, and the added can't be targeted is also
Exactly.
really helping Meaty at this point as well.
Is this still clean the scene though? It probably has to be, right? Because I think if that 1/1 goes in, it'll kill the Voltron and the 3/1, right?
Probably.
Molten Rune, okay. Random spell time.
Yeah, going for those outs.
Ugh.
Yeah, those seem a little slow. Going for the rush and heal, but I don't know if this is it
Finley,
here.
go away, find me something better.
Yeah,
And that's the problem, right? Every option Uikyou's had has just been like, this would be good if I had 10 more mana.
Right, yeah.
But not really been available to do now, and I think this is just the, I say the beginning of the end. I think it's just the end, or very likely to be anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think not having an answer for the Mimiron over multiple turns from that start just really kind of started the downfall. This Finley did pick up a solid alibi. I guess that is something.
Right.
I'm stretching.
I completely agree. It's something.
It's a card.
And there we go, yeah. Not too
like
much
a
of a
weird
version of the Sith. Instead of a Sith,
Exactly,
there's always
yeah.
two, there's always a fourth.
There is. But, additionally, as you mentioned, we're not that far out from the expansion and kind of these OTK decks. And I think that some of these players might also be bringing Outcast DH as a deck that they're already very familiar with. So they don't really have to relearn 4 different decks. They can kind of bring in some of these decks that they're already familiar with and maybe just kind of see how they pair up into some of the other decks that maybe are a little bit newer. And that can help, especially when you're going into these matches that you're really looking to get solid wins. If you're already very comfortable with a deck, that can definitely go a long way.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where a lot of the decks, it's something we're probably going to bring up all weekend, but even the decks that are doing big bursts in the late game, they want to be winning the early game, right? Like, look at the Mage mirror we cast at the start of this match, where both decks want to do big burst, but the deck that got on board early applied all of the pressure, and suddenly the big burst didn't need to be so big anymore. And I think that's a big deal with this Outcast Demon Hunter, where it doesn't. Well, okay, it does have options to burst damage, but just not like the with spells strictly. But I think the getting on board and not letting your opponent get on board early is something that's very powerful, as we've seen as we step into turn 2 for Meati, and already there is a flurry of minions attacking Uikyou.
Yeah. And it's very interesting, I think, into some matchups as well. Like you're saying, this early damage, well, some of these decks don't really have great ways
Yeah.
to answer those early boards. And as we see here as well, Uikyou has a super clunky hand as well, which is certainly not helping. Maybe coining into this cold case can stall a little bit of this damage, puts a couple minions on board to kind of contest this onslaught from Meati, but is it enough to win in the long run? And how do you keep going about that? I like the Lady Nazjar as well in hand, potentially, if that's followed up behind the cold case. It adds additional armor that can help, and that might just kind of delay the game long enough for Uikyou to find some of those other answers.
Just gonna hold on to everything though.
Forget everything we just said, right?
Yeah. Oh look, you know when I said it wasn't through spells that this deck did burst damage? Yeah, that's it.
That's the
18
one.
million damage being thrown out there, and it's still not looking too good. There's some clear now, but the problem is what happens to the Dark Raven, right? Like now it's the problem of, well, you can clear a bit, but not all. If you can't clear all, you're dead.
Yeah, and I think if it hadn't been exactly that Dark Raven there, the pickup of the Inquisitive Creation looked pretty good, but yeah, not clearing enough ultimately.
Yeah, really tricky as well, though, because obviously, like, Havera's there, but Meati had Glaive Tar as well, so there was still plenty, obviously not this level of damage and threat, but there was still damage coming out from Meati, and Uikyou was still clutching for some kind of way to get some work done here. It's going to be Arcane Bot and then Coin Creation, I guess.
Yeah, I don't really see any other way.
It's something.
Yeah, as you mentioned, though, still quite a bit of damage with things like the Glaive Tar. Meati absolutely could just set that up, add that hero power damage, but it's not enough for lethal this turn, but it does set up a potential 2-turn lethal.
Yeah, and I'm just staring now, trying to think, while the Hawkstride is on board, yeah, okay, going to play the minion and go into Glaive. Okay, I did wonder if Meati was going to go for the Spectral Sight, but I guess this can always be outcast next turn, but with this play as well, puts the most damage in face, and now it's that same issue we sort of saw in the Mage Mirror at the beginning, where is there enough mana to tick all these boxes, right? Clear the board and not die to the Glaive Tar. There is the Artificer now, so that is something, especially with the cold case, but it just feels like a delaying the inevitable at this point.
Yeah, it really does. I feel like that's just been the story through this whole match, all of these games so far. This third game, not breaking that pattern. Meati just absolutely getting on board or putting on the pressure every single game. And what a way to go. Found the lethal.
Yeah,
you love
you know
to
what?
see it.
The mental fortitude to be able to lethal yourself after this series is absolutely magnificent, and I applaud it, because that is the way to go out, and to be able to just do that, fair enough. But yeah, the Meatman taking the match 3-0. That's exactly what you want your day to look like, right? If you're playing in a tournament this stacked with this much on the line, a World Championship spot, is to just say, yeah, I got into my winner's match, and then I just 3-0'd in about 10 minutes, and then, yeah, I'm going to go chill out, watch the rest of the tournament, go to bed early, get some rest for the next day, as Meatman now is going to move on. Like, it was another short and sweet one, but any highlights for you from this very short series, Don?
I think that overall it seemed like Meati was able to really just recognize the lines where he was putting on the most amount of pressure, and that just seems like something very good to do in Hearthstone in general, but I think in this meta as well, just applying that pressure and forcing your opponent to have answers for it, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and Uikyou just did not really have the answers for it this time around.
Yeah, well, that one went past in the blink